So welcome everyone to today's ONUG webinar. Our topic today is unlocking AIOps with Red Hat and IP Fabric, the power of dependency mapping. I'm your host, Stephen Collins. I am the ONUG CTO, and I'll be your moderator today. And we have two speakers. We have Martin Mauchka, who's manager of IT networks at Red Hat. And we have Vitek Savil, who's the senior channel development manager at IP Fabric. We're going to have an interesting discussion today about how Red Hat's been working with IP Fabric to do a much better job of getting a handle what's going on inside of the network infrastructure and responding better to issues and anomalies and incidents within the network, and leveraging this dependency mapping capability to do a much better job of being proactive and automating workflows, et cetera. It's a really interesting topic, and I think very timely given the state of where networks are today. Before we dive in, though, I want to let everybody know, feel free to ask any questions that may arise during the course of the next half hour or so. You can do that by entering your question via the Q&A tab at any time. We'll probably queue the questions up towards the end, but feel free to ask them at any time, especially if they're really relevant. Maybe we'll just stop and answer it right at that point. So that's a little bit of housekeeping here. I just wanted to help set the stage here a little bit, and since the topic is AIOps, and how this is related to AIOps. And the interesting thing here is AIOps, that term was coined by Gartner way back in 2016. So, in the industry, we've got almost a decade's worth of experience with AIOps solutions. And back when this kind of first came on the scene, a lot of the AIOps actually boiled down to kind of machine learning using statistical analysis of time series data, usually processes that were focused on a given domain or a given layer within the network. Some fairly powerful tools were developed, but again, it's kind of really zeroing in on a given domain or a given layer. Then the neural networks became kind of commercially viable, so we started doing more actual machine learning on data, and that actually allowed not just to look backward and do kind of historical views of what was going on in that work, but you could actually use those types of capabilities to do predictions about what was going on. So there's been a lot of really interesting technology that's been developed, and of course, the amount of data that can now be consumed and analyzed and processed is now kind of mind-blowing. So tools have gotten nothing but more powerful, kind of at that kind of atomic level. But what's interesting is, as AIOps has progressed in its capabilities, the environments that we're operating in have progressed in terms of complexity and scale. So, back 10 years ago, a lot of folks were probably just running applications within their own data center. Maybe they were starting to dabble with the cloud. If you look at where we are today, you've still got a lot going on, of course, inside of, on-premise data centers, but there's also a whole lot that's going on in the cloud, and actually in multiple clouds and multiple SaaS applications. So the whole environment has become much more distributed, much more dynamic, much more complex. And so it's been a challenge, I think, for AIOps techniques to kind of evolve out of that kind of private data center environment into this now highly complex and distributed environment with layers of virtualization, et cetera. So the interesting thing is, what needs to be done to kind of harness the power of AIOps in these environments. And really what it boils down to is being able to understand and track the relationships between different elements, network elements, devices, elements of the application infrastructure, what the relationships are between all those components, and also the relationships between them as they change over time. And some of that can be highly dynamic in these, very virtualized application environments that are now becoming, commonplace with things like Kubernetes, container-based applications. So we're in a world now where AIOps is going to be not just a nice to have, it's going to be a got to have. And I think what we're going to talk about today with Martin and Vitek here is a really important concept called dependency mapping, and how that can be used to keep track of what the relationships are between different components or different elements and different layers or different domains, and then just do a much better job of keeping track of what's going on, predicting what might be going on, and doing a leveraging the power of automation tools that are now at our disposal. And that's before we even start to apply things like, generative AI and large language models to the problems that need to be solved. So we're kind of really, I think, at another inflection point here in the way networks and application environments are evolving. And so I think today's topic is particularly relevant to all of that. So with that little bit of a long-winded introduction, I'm going to hand this over to Martin and Vitek and let them run with it.
Thank you, Steve. Let me move us on the topic. So thank you for the introduction there. And I think what we are dealing at this moment with is really the AIOps paradox. So the promise is huge, having proactive self-healing IT that saves money and time. But eventually we have vast amount of data that is overwhelming, and as you mentioned, Steve, it's very hard to navigate through the complex infrastructure of virtualization containers, all the systems being very distributed in multiple data centers on premise or even in the cloud. So basically, the core problem at this moment is that teams lack the real visibility into the infrastructure. They fail to understand how things are being connected, what is dependent on what, and what happens when something breaks, or what happens when I do a change somewhere. What am I breaking potentially? So that's the biggest question that we have currently. And what AIOps actually is. Well, AIOps is not a magic AI that you just go and plug it into your infrastructure and it will suddenly understand everything, be able to make all the decisions, be able to provide you with the full visibility end to end. But you eventually need to provide that context and provide that so you can augment your expertise with the tooling, with data for data-driven decisions, and really moving from from reactive to proactive, and eventually automated remediation. For that, as I said, you need the context. So you need a single source of truth that is showing in a machine-readable format of how things are actually connected, how things are dependent on each other. And you have to go with from very bottom layer of infrastructure up to the application stack and individual application resources, because one application is not just one VM running somewhere, but it's multiple resources that are connecting to each other and discussing or talking data. So you need to have that context somewhere. And that is where the dependency map is coming in, right? So you cannot eventually automate what you don't understand, and dependency mapping is there to help you understand that. Dependency mapping is there to be able to connect everything, instantly understand and see the blast radius if there is an outage, so you can have a fast or automated root cause analysis nowadays with AI agents and everything. With this context that you provide to AI agent, it can pretty much automate the root cause analysis with all that context. You can have smarter automation where you are really hitting the right playbook for the right target, and you get the automated remediation in no time. And well, as I mentioned, you understand what you are eventually breaking when you do a change. So whenever you do a change planning, you know your upstream downstream relationships, so you know who to notify, who to talk to. You have some stakeholders that are dependent on your piece of infrastructure. So when you do that change, you can clearly articulate what the impact is, and have that scheduled, so nobody is affected, or you limit that impact of the change. How we actually started with building the dependency map, now that I talk about so much of the dependency map, we have a lot of tooling, but we decided to start with a couple of tools. We have some data in ServiceNow where we have the CMDB, where we store all the data about business applications and what actually forms these applications like VMs, OpenShift Kubernetes resources, and storage and all that stuff. So we have that information there, but that it's not showing how it's connected down to the networking layer. We have network automation. We basically automate the whole network infrastructure, and we know how network infrastructure is connected. We have OpenShift where we run basically nowadays all the virtualization and containers, and that can provide via API quite a lot of context. But again, it's not showing the full context. So we chose Netbox as an open source tool to actually be the aggregator of the information. We wanted to put there all the data from network, from those sources like ServiceNow, OpenShift, network automation, and kind of connect it all together. But for that, to be achieved that, we needed the glue, and that's why we are partnering on this webinar with IP Fabric, because we used IP Fabric as the glue for the data to connect the dots between the application resources, the virtualization workers, and the infrastructure, the network infrastructure. Basically, IP Fabric as automated network assurance platform allowed us to pull data via API for all the ARP, MAC address tables to be able to use that data as the glue between what we had on one side and the other side. So application, CMDB, and the network infrastructure and OpenShift. They resulted in pretty much simple script that you can use, go to the API of IP Fabric and get all the data, basically get the exact edge of where it's connected to what, and connect it all into one picture.
Martin, listening to you, it's very interesting to me because I've been speaking with large Fortune 500 companies for the past few years, and it seems, that this issue with operating in silos and having data in multiple different places, they've always had it. They always knew it's a problem, and they always were figuring out workarounds, or it wasn't being tackled proactively. So I hope that now, as this AIOps starts picking up, people will finally have a reason to move away from this and really figure out a way to standardize everything.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. I mean, silos are a big issue, right? When you have siloed data and you don't have the overall picture, you cannot achieve anything because you will have blind spots, you will have gap in the logic and correlations that AIOps needs to do. So literally you have to have some level of standardization, some level of visibility, and the better you standardize, the better visibility that you have from on-prem infrastructure up to the cloud, the better you can do with implementing AIOps. On the next slide, basically, what is next, right? When you have the dependency map, what is actually the next step? So I mentioned multiple times something like automated remediation. For that, you have to go. You can go with well, from the mapping into the action. For us, the chosen platform was Ansible, where basically you have an event, you have correlation of events to incident, and then you can have or make data-driven smart decisions and just go and trigger event-driven automation to remediate. Which with that you are basically reducing the toil as much as you can, and you can keep adding to that. And also you have basically context-aware automation that can resolve things for you. So you are basically moving, or this is the first step where you are moving from reactive to automated or to proactive eventually. So that's the next step there. I would just maybe summarize it from my side with key takeaways here. What you need to do, you have to reframe your goal. You have to aim for intelligent automation rather than some mythical, all-knowing AI that is a black box that you plug in and all your things are being solved instantly. Going to the AIOps is heavy lift, that's for sure, but it is achievable. You have to start with the foundation. You have to rather than building complex automation, complex AIOps platform, you have to start with the dependency map. You have to understand what you are actually going to connect, what context you need to provide. Then for the data that you already have, find your glue. As I mentioned, for us it was IP Fabric, but find a glue that can do it for you. Then when you have that glue, you have the dependency map. Start building on top of that. So when you have the foundation, start building on top of that. Start with automating with context, and then go to the proactive. Having the automation with context, having some automated remediation will remove the toil for you, and with that you actually can invest more time in going proactive, going smart, and going with new tools. Nowadays, with the boom of LLMs and AI agents, it's even easier than before.
And Martin, with implementing this in your infrastructure and your teams starting to use it, would you say that, of course, you save time, you make things more efficient, but is this unlocking some new interesting processes or things that you weren't doing before in general?
Certainly, it identifies some data quality gaps where we need to address those with standardization, as we mentioned. What it opens on the processes side, being proactive, breaking down the silos as well, but being proactive, really identify maybe circle the dependencies where you have basically chicken egg problem, and you are creating infrastructure that is impossible to recover from a failure. That all can be done with well, code and some further analysis. So those are the new things that it unlocks for you or for us. And well, I think that's the major thing. There is many more, but it's small things here and there that it unlocks, and it's actually eye-opening when you see something like this in action, that you see context that you couldn't see before.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for that question. And let me open up this slide. So Vitek, it's your time, I guess.
It's my time. So I think what you said as the last thought is a nice intro to what we're doing, because it's really about being proactive. And Martin, we've been working together with you and with Red Hat for the last 3 years, where IP Fabric was always used as a baseline for automation. The reason I'm saying this is that most of the people that listen right now are probably just thinking about AIOps or maybe just doing the initial research. But IP Fabric is very relevant if you're not there yet, maybe if you're just thinking to automate, or if you're thinking about observability, because all of these new trends, what they have in common is that you really need a solid standardized data set to make them work. And you have multiple options how to approach this. You have options to start writing your scripts on your own, or just collecting very specific data, or to get a tool that will do it for you and really accelerate your development, because you don't need to think about this part, and you can immediately get to a point where you have the data and you can start working with them. So what does this look like? If I this is screen 2, perfect. So what this means is that you get one tool which gets information from all of your islands, from all of your silos. I have my AWS here. I have my Azure, my F5 load balancers, my VMware NS60, my firewalls, and all of this is ready for you out of the box to start working with it. What Martin was talking about with the information about the hosts, about the ARP tables, this is not just a list of devices, but there is hundreds and hundreds of pre-collected tables that are very relevant to give context to any of the advanced initiatives that you may have. Martin was talking about ARP table, which I have here. But for the ones that are not so advanced, usually the first step in automation, or probably the first step in leveraging AI, would be tell me what problems I have. So to understand this, first you need the data, and then you need to put the logic in. And sometimes you can even just use IP Fabric, where if I just put one example, we're just working with a customer where after they run the first discovery and we went to this table, they noticed, why do I have V1 here? We just failed an audit, everything should be V3. So if you get a use case like this, you can just use IP Fabric directly to make your intent check. Tell IP Fabric, my intent is if version is V1, make it red, or in this case, make it green if it's V3, because this is what I want, and make everything else red. So I can just easily use a tool like this to quickly, proactively validate my network. And this saves me a lot of time, because now I can action all of these insights. I can feed them to my AI or automation logic, and I can get the results based on this. So really accelerates all of these projects. While we're at this, we can also do topology maps, which I don't want to spend too much time on today, but if this is relevant, please do reach out to us, or we have an online demo available. But another thing that is very important for the context and for, let's say, understanding the dependencies in your infrastructure is that if you have a project where you know you will be adding a new application, or you need to troubleshoot, you need to understand how the infrastructure actually communicates and how the path looks. And based on all of that data that we collect, we can show you. I can say, okay, this is my IPA, this is my second IP. I can be much more specific. And now from the perspective of getting a context, I immediately see this is where the device is connected. It's being blocked by this firewall. And because IP Fabric really is a in-depth data platform, we also have the historical views. So I can then go back in time. You see that now I'm looking at the network after the change. And I can say, how did this look before the change? And now I can dig deeper. I can evaluate. I can overlay, immediately see that I don't need to open that firewall because someone actually changed the route here. And all of these things are very relevant for you to complement the standard reactive tooling that throws alerts at you. But it's very hard to get to the analytical part. And this analytical part is what will be required by all the upcoming AI initiatives to actually give you the value.
And we take now that you show that you can have the intent-based checks and comparing the snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke about event-driven automation. So can you fire an event from IP Fabric? So it says, hey, this failed, and you can do an action based on it?
No, absolutely, you can. We do support webhooks, and there's multiple ways how to approach this. The way we think about IP Fabric is that we want everyone to have this one tool to go to and look at information, but at the same time, we respect the fact that specialized teams have their own dashboards. It can be Grafana, can be Zabbix, can be SolarWind, that they already fine-tuned, have some workflows in there. So everything that I'm showing can be gathered through API. Even this end-to-end, I can just get the API documentation right here. Every check. So for instance, we do have customers, if I just stay on the screen, that use IP Fabric to validate segmentation. I can just say, if I go to post change, here I see it's being blocked. I can say, this is correct. This should always fail. And now after I save the path, the next time IP Fabric does a discovery and sees, careful, someone made a bypass around your firewall, just like we've seen in this use case, you will know about it. Thank you.
This is good. Thank you.
I'm conscious of the time because I could keep talking about IP Fabric for a long, long time. We barely scratched the surface. But I think really the key takeaway is don't think about how you can collect data. There's a lot of tools that can already do this for you. They can integrate to your ServiceNows, to your Netbox, or you can just use them on their own. And this will save you many months of development.
Okay, we've got plenty of time here for questions, and I would encourage people to have any questions to enter them now in the Q&A tab. I have a couple that I'd like to ask, and we had one that did come in through the chat, but preferred vehicles to put them in through the Q&A. But just to start off here, Martin, okay, so you talked about what you've done to date. What's next for Red Hat in terms of IP Fabric data? What do you have planned?
So for us, well, as Vitek was showing, for us, the next is intent-based checking and plugging that into those signals and events. I mentioned that AIOps is also about making or grouping the individual signals from the infrastructure and applications and everything. So getting those signals in as well is one of the next steps for us. For us, it's also getting more out of the API and filling in more data into the dependency map. So when the AI is enriching events that are already there, it has more context of what is running where, not only how things are connected, but what device it is, what version, everything like that.
Yeah, another question is kind of an obvious one, actually. So if you didn't have IP Fabric at your disposal, um, you know, where would that leave you? What would you have to do otherwise, in terms of achieving the levels of automation you're trying to get to here?
Good question. We would have to go look for any other tool like that or develop something our own because you still need this level of insight. And I will keep it calling the glue for the data that you have from other sources. And it was just wiser for us to go with IP Fabric than spending a huge amount of time on developing something custom.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how long that would take you? How big a project that would be?
Well, depending on the size of the team, but it would certainly take ages. I mean, with the variety of platforms that we have and maintaining everything for each platform. When code changes, you have to change something. Yeah, that I don't want to
Martin,
even
yeah.
imagine, to be honest.
Martin, I'm still sometimes using what you told me a long time ago when we were initially talking together, and you told me how you're planning to, increase what you're automating, and you were saying that many of your tools have native API, but you don't have this for your legacy infrastructure. And you told that you see IP Fabric as an API endpoint for your legacy network, and I really like that. So this is something that stuck with me.
Yeah, that's a good quote, to be honest, because we don't have that legacy network anymore. As you said, we use IP Fabric for quite a long time, but we still use the API endpoint. It's just with SRE way of working and AIOps nowadays. It is just nice when you can hit an API and get the data that you are looking for.
Okay, we had a question that came in earlier, which is how can IP Fabric discover telco provider edges for MPLS?
I'm gonna just talk about how IP Fabric discovers in general. We had just a little bit of time, so this was more of a sneak peek, but this is what makes us unique because we don't use any SNMP, we don't use any IP scanning, anything like this, but this is really based on a best practice of what a CCIE engineer would do if you ask him, please map my network. So we are using SSH for the legacy devices, and then we're using API for the devices that do support API. And we usually only need few starting points where we connect to device number 1. We see there's CDP here. We see there is a routing relation. We look into the ARP table. We think this MAC looks like a Cisco router. Let's connect there as well. So we don't try to blindly go everywhere, but it's very efficient and very accurate. I'll be happy to talk about this later with you.
Yeah, I guess the takeaway is you're going to do what an expert CCIE person would do,
Exactly.
right? In terms of probing the network. I got you. Yeah. Another question came in here. I'm going to just read it verbatim. Is there a common sweet spot you see for enterprise customers taking snapshots of their network to best help assure intended state? In other words, snapshots every 2 hours, every 4 hours.
I have an answer, but Martin, I'm curious, what is your approach? How many time do you do snapshots?
So let me try to remember from top of my head. I think currently we have full snapshot every 4 hours and do on-demand snapshots when we
Yep.
need in between.
In general, we can discover, let's say, 2,000 switches, routers, firewalls within 20 minutes. So it's very fast. I would say the best practice is 2 times, maximum 3 times a day to do a very large snapshot. And this is usually enough, just to compare the state and so on. Then, of course, you can do smaller snapshots before a change, after change, and so on. All of this can be triggered through API as well.
Hi, we just had a question pop in here via the chat. So this is directed at you, Martin. And I'm going to read it verbatim. How many NE do you have? How many interfaces? How many vendors? How old is your network infrastructure? How many hosts? There's a lot of questions there.
That's quite specific. I will try to answer without going into the knowledge base that we have or the DCM that we have. Number of network devices. I think it goes with couple of thousands. In addition of that, access points and other network devices as well, or appliances. You just multiply that by default number of interfaces. I don't know from the top of my head, to be honest, how many interfaces. When it comes to the number of vendors, we intend to be multi-vendor, so we have multiple vendors, 2 to 5, depending on what you count into that. How old is the infrastructure? As old as we can stay with being compliant. So everything is under support. So basically the usual life cycle. And I think that's probably what I can tell at this moment.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, this lifecycle piece was one of the aspects when Martin was testing IP Fabric back before you were the manager, right, Martin? It was some time ago. So we do have the end of life information out of the box as well. So I know that this was another thing that you back then was impressed by, saying how much time it saved.
Vitek, I had a question for you. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody else.
No, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, Vitek, I just was wondering, could you just elaborate a little bit more on the specific types of dependency mappings that you maintain? Not, more based on, okay, these types of mappings versus these, rather than, enumerating all of them in those different categories, just to give people a better feeling for, what those mappings are.
Yeah, I would say that dependency map is the, let's say, one step above. What IP Fabric gives you, it gives you hundreds and hundreds of standardized parsed information. So if you have a question about how is my AAA configured, if you have a question, how does my .1x look, how is my BGP configured, what is my global route table, all of that, you have one place to go, and it doesn't matter if you have one vendor in infrastructure or if you have 5. It is all standardized, ready to be used. And then with the dependency maps, we do know about all the hosts. We do know how they're connected. We can show you if the path is redundant. So this is right there in IP Fabric. sometimes it makes sense to use the integrations we have with tools like Netbox or ServiceNow and really use this as a baseline and still enrich it with some other sources as well that we can't get directly through the command line of the devices.
Okay, we got another question in the chat here. Interesting question. Martin, what functionality do you see as a gap in IP Fabric? I guess asked another way, what would you like to see IP Fabric add to the product capability?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. It's pretty good question, and as you said, I wouldn't call it a gap. Maybe something that we would like to see going forward, and we actually are planning to submit some of the requests for features with IP Fabric. So, as I mentioned, we are using MAC address tables to collect a lot of data, but we are also planning to go even a step further with LLDP and well XDP protocols. And we like some flexibility there of the custom fields that you can use within the LLDP to have IP Fabric to parse those. So definitely one of the RFEs that we are going to submit. Well, you get the basic information is there. I think it's sufficient for most of the companies, but for us, we just require that cherry on top with being a little bit more flexible. And nowadays, what I would like to see definitely support for MCP server. With agent ops becoming a thing, we are talking about AIOps, but now it's also a term agent ops. It's definitely gonna be helpful if we can get MCP server that will be natively supported by IP Fabric that can connect and provide context for your LLMs.
Martin, maybe from this perspective, this is something we're thinking about. We're still evaluating the best way to add, support for AI into IP Fabric, because we don't want to be another vendor with just improved chatbot, calling it AI. With the GUI and IP Fabric is very straightforward. It's easy to get data, but something like what Martin described is definitely what we're considering for the future of the tool.
All right, I think this is going to be a wrap. I think we're heading up about 40 minutes after the hour here. So I'd say I'd like to conclude, but before we do that, I believe we're going to put some information in the chat for folks who want to follow up and learn more about Red Hat and about IP Fabric. So I think there's a set of links there that have just popped into the chat. By all means, access those. Also, the folks at IP Fabric will be following up with all the attendees. So if you have any other specific questions, technical questions, business-related questions, by all means, feel free to ask those. So in conclusion here, I'd like again to thank Red Hat, thank IP Fabric, specifically thank Martin and Vitek for taking the time with us today, and thank you all for tuning in. Those of you who just tuned in live, and those who are going to catch this via the replay. And I think that's it, and we'll call that a wrap. Look forward to having everyone back here for our next ONUG webinar somewhere down the road. Thank you.
Thank you.